welcome back. And in the 4th grade of Newcastle District Cricket, and West have secured a 9-146 to 10-145 win over Hamwicks. Meantime, Stockton and Northern Districts beated Belmont with a 166 to 162 win. Meantime, Newcastle City managed to defeat Wallsend with a 2-700 with a 277 to 10-179 win. Also, Wildtar Mayfield had a win over the University of Newcastle Sea Dragons with a 200 to 22 win. And also, Merewether had a win over Charlestown. Also, Cardiff Boolaroo had a victory with a 307 to 245 win over Toronto. To Central Coast Cricket, and in the round 8 of the women's competition, Terrigal has secured a victory over Wyong 3-65 to 6-63, while Lisarow Arimba defeated the Northern Power 2-179 to 7-133. While Narara Wyoming defeated Kincumber Avoca with a 4-94 to 7-91 victory. While in round 5 of the Tamworth District Cricket competition, and Bective East had a 8-124 to 10-122 win over the Old Boys, and Tamworth City United had a 6-227 to 10-121 win over South Tamworth. To Mid-North Coast Cricket, and in the junior competition and in the under 11s, and it was a mixed one with the juniors. Defeating their rivals 8-109 to 8-44. While there was also a win for the Gold, who managed to defeat the Green 5-141 to 8-79. To Far North Coast Cricket, and 3 games were called off due to wet weather, but thankfully 2 went ahead, as Byron Bay defeated Austinville with a 5-210 to 8-207. Meantime, Bangalore defeated Moolumbar with a 2-108 to 9-101. To North Coast Cricket, and in the Mid-North one, and the Coffs Colts have beaten Sawtell. Meanwhile, the Valleys were too strong for their rivals, and Harwood defeated the Northern Districts. Now let's go straight to Now let's go to a lot of local sports flashbacks from June 2000. And of course, it's where New South Wales won the Rugby League State of Origin. And of course, there were more local news stories that came above.
They're not quite on a par with the regular Olympic Games. For a start, the athletes are 5 years old. 70 students at Waratah Public School competed in their own mini-Olympics, the culmination of a 6-week program with the University of Newcastle, designed to develop their motor skills.
We're looking at it both locomotor, so the skipping, the hopping, the galloping, the running, and then the sports, basic sports-related skills such as striking and kicking and throwing and catching.
Research suggests more than 50% of children aged 5 to 12 in New South Wales don't have those basic skills. Dr Thompson attributes that statistic to technology. These days, Nintendo games are far more popular than backyard cricket. The school has run the program with the university for 10 years, with benefits for all involved.
Our teachers benefit by associating with these students. The students benefit by having practical experience.
They'll be more inclined to be involved in physical activity, and it will track into adult lifestyles. And yes, the spin-off is healthy young Australians.
Catherine Turner, NBN News.
While it's not quite damage control, the Knights know their image isn't the best, but the long road back started today.
In general terms, we know that it could have been handled differently, but you've got to make your decisions and you live and die by them.
Most recently, efforts have been made for an extraordinary meeting to be called for a vote of no confidence in the board, with a petition expected to be delivered to the club next week. And business at the Knights Leagues Club could be better too. Staff have begun contacting people who have functions booked there later in the year to look elsewhere, with the growing possibility the club won't continue trading past the end of the football season. The move to Mayfield and Club Phoenix look better by the day, with more meetings held today.
It's taken a little longer than we had hoped, and it will be probably 10 days or so before we get a result.
While learning lessons the hard way in registered clubs, management has done it tough in the way of player negotiations as well. The Matthew Johns affair prompting a change in club policy.
We've been particularly concerned to try and bring the players to the fore in the negotiation.
And they're waiting for the biggest buy of all to make his decision.
We are making progress there, but we believe there's too much heat in the situation from a family point of view for us to press the issue. We will wait on Andrew.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. Hooker Danny Medeiros came to training and then left just as quickly. The hooker home with the flu, but is still expected to play on Sunday.
A bit of flu, I think, or a bit of a cold. No, I think he'll be all right. Dave Fairley had it yesterday, and he was right 24 hours later, so hopefully Danny will be right for Sunday.
One who'll pack down with him on Sunday is Paul Rahihi, the big forward back in the team for Matt Parsons, who's out with a knee injury, and Rahihi is keen to make an impact.
Anyone who comes out of first grade wants to stay up there, so yeah, I'm looking forward to doing the same.
Winger Justin Ryder gets a recall, with Darren Albert ruled out again with his foot injury, now not responding to treatment.
It seems so. It seems like we might be without him for, at least another week or two.
It's taken much longer for Warren Ryan to equal the NRL coaching record with his 405th game this weekend, matching Bob Fulton's mark.
Yeah, it was just a product of old age, Jim.
Of more importance to Ryan is the result. Sitting in fourth, he knows a win and favourable results will have the Knights sitting strong in second spot.
Tried very hard this week to impress upon them, even more so than any game this year. I've probably worked on the importance of the game.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. Back at the place where it all started today at Birmingham Gardens, Clayton Zane reflected on what's been a rapid rise up the ranks. Since leaving Newcastle for the Northern Spirit, the talented player is now based in Norway and recently cracked a spot in Australia's senior side, the Socceroos.
I was a little bit shocked to start with, but to get called in against the number 2 ranked team in the world was certainly a big step from where I was at.
Already starring for Australia at under-23 level, Zane can't wait to represent on home soil for the top national side against Paraguay on Friday.
It's always an honour to play for your country, but basically to play for the full senior national team on home soil in front of my family and friends should be a great experience.
And it doesn't stop there. After the 3-match series comes the run towards Sydney 2000.
It's quite hectic. We're coming backwards and forwards at the moment, but like I say, the Olympics is my ultimate goal, and from there I'll just try and cement a place in the national team when I get given the opportunity.
And former teammate at Newcastle, Todd McManus, has won the Breakers Players Player Award. The defender capping off a fine year to beat strikers John Bonavolia and Andy Harper for the title.
Whenever you like it or not, it's of course Waratah Mayfield up against local rivals West, and of course both had to quickly play against each other. And of course Waratah Mayfield had a player forced to be sent off due to a cut onto his mouth, but thankfully the club managed to score tries before being forced to score once again and win the game. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
The state CHS rugby league trials have long been a breeding ground for the NRL. A scan around the grandstand indicated the high level of interest from Sydney clubs out to spot their future stars. The under-15 section of the championship kicked things off today with Northern taking on Western. While the Zones are out to win, the players have state selection on their minds as well, with the national championships to be played next month at Port Macquarie. That's where Northern halfback Clinton Foote is from, and he showed plenty of toe today in the opening match. But it was Western who had the better of the first half, with Dubbo's Chris R.C. crossing in the corner to grab a 4-0 lead. Northern toughened up around the middle, but to no avail, beaten 8-6 and up against a strong Sydney team tonight. Western meanwhile play Southern, who were thrashed 42-0 by the Sydney Siders. The state squad is chosen tomorrow after the final matches.
Judith Brown's battered body was discovered by her husband on Friday afternoon, slumped just inside the door of her Anna Bay home. The mother of three was struck several times in the head with an unknown implement. Today, a post-mortem revealing she was killed sometime that morning.
We believe that the woman, Judy Brown, died from a number of blows to the head. That has caused massive head trauma and a fractured skull, which has resulted in her death.
The search will be stepped up to try and locate the murder weapon. A task force of 12 police officers now assigned to the investigation. The family moved from Singleton earlier this year, with Judith quickly gaining employment in the area. A number of people have already been questioned over the murder, including her husband. Detectives say there is little evidence to suggest this murder is connected to three others in the Hunter over the last few weeks.
I can understand everyone's interest in that we have had 4 murders within a very short time frame within a reasonably confined geographical area. Other than that, really there's not a great deal more to connect them.
Helen Kapelos, NBN News.
In a meeting with Soccer Australia boss Stefan Kamaz today, David Hall said he was still in control of the Newcastle Breakers and that property company True Blue were not the owners. This comes just days after the club issued a statement saying Hall had quit as chairman and had nothing to do with the running of it. He also told Kamaz he had the financial documentation to prove it, and Soccer Australia want that by Wednesday. Meanwhile, the Northern New South Wales Soccer Federation has sought out investors to back its plan to have a team in the NSL should the Breakers fail to meet requirements needed to play next season. In fact, the Federation has had a plan in place for some time, after it first feared David Hall may not be able to meet owner obligations set down by Soccer Australia. But just who the owner they have in waiting is remains unclear.
They'll present themselves if and when the opportunity arises.
It's known businessman Con Constantine was keen to buy the club, but existing club debts were too high. Hall still owes the $250,000 NSL licence fee and creditors around $200,000, while the former consortium is still waiting for their $1.2 million from the original sale. With the memory of losing National League clubs before, the Federation decided that it had to do something.
We are aware that a number of players have been approached, and we don't want them to go. We want to keep the team together in Newcastle.
It's thought if the Federation's plan is fulfilled, the current Breakers playing and coaching staff would be heavily involved. Switching Matthew Gidley from centre to 5'8" this weekend just doesn't add up for coach Warren Ryan, so Sean Rudder will steer the side around in the number 6 jumper.
If you look at Rudder, he's an ex-halfback with terrific long pass, great peripheral vision.
Filling in after Matthew Johns tore a calf muscle against Brisbane, Rudder plugged the gap nicely. Newcastle has never won at Canberra, and while that doesn't daunt the coach, the possibility of snow does. After that match at Bruce, which was played in snow, Newcastle will train with wet footballs this week and look into wearing thermal gear to keep warm.
Tell the backs we don't want anyone suffering hypothermia. They've got to wear warm clothes. I don't care if they wear tracksuits.
And the back line looks strong, so long as Adam McDougall, Gidley and Andrew Johns make it through Origin 3 unhurt. So to the forwards, Kennedy is named pending New South Wales duty, while utility back Daniel Abrahams is on the bench and may see some work in the back row. Prop Clinton O'Brien's early guilty plea to a careless tackle charge saw him miss suspension, but any indiscretion from here on will cost him.
Yeah, I just hope not to have another charge, as simple as that. So it doesn't really bother me, Jim, to tell you the truth.
As for Matthew Johns' calf muscle injury,
He says only a week, Matthew.
doctors think it'll more likely be 2. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
It took many hours of training in the pool, but now several of the Knights have graduated and taken the big plunge.
You know, most of the time when we're not training, it's hard to find stuff to do, so this is good.
And the day could be considered acclimatisation to the cold as the team head off to chilly Canberra this weekend for their next NRL clash. But today training was far from their minds. Instead, they explored the oceans just out of the Nelson Bay headlands. And when they surfaced...
Mate, unbelievable. Some of the size of the fish down there. I'm glad they're not sharks, but...
But it's not the sharks that the players should be worried about. With several players down from their side this week, they should be more concerned about the Raiders. But while the weather conditions were fine, their only real concern was keeping warm. And who could do the best dolphin impersonation?
It seems to make your body feel real recovered and relaxed, so it's good.
Adam Harper, NBN News.
This doorstop ornament is similar to the one that went missing from the home of Judith Brown the day she was murdered, and detectives now believe it was the murder weapon used to bludgeon the Anna Bay mother of 3 to death last Friday. Today they renewed calls for help from the public.
We've still got police up there. We will be looking at specific areas. Those that sort of appear more obvious to us, but obviously the public's moving around areas that we haven't even contemplated.
Earlier this week, an autopsy revealed the 41-year-old was violently bashed around the head several times, her wallet and handbag also stolen in the attack. Forensic pathologists will now re-examine the body to see if the injuries are consistent with those inflicted by a concrete object. The murder inquiry is just one of several investigations new local area commander John Trott will oversee when he joins the Lower Hunter Command next week.
The fortunate part is that I'm getting a complete briefing over the next several days from a number of sources, so I'll be in a very good position to actually take over as the commander.
He replaces acting LAC Sam Finlay, who returns to the Newcastle Command. Helen Kapelos, NBN News.
Over the Queen's birthday long weekend, more than 50 competitors will take to the waters at Toronto to contest in the championship races.
It's spectacular to see, in the hydro particularly, things like this. I mean, they throw up a rooster tail, and it's very entertaining and it's good to watch.
Several categories of boats ranging from the junior boats to the record holders will slip their hulls into the water.
They're quick. The big boys are doing 100 mile an hour. The juniors are doing 25 or 20 mile an hour.
Meanwhile, at Barley Ranch Raceway at Raymond Terrace, more than 100 land-dwelling speedsters will muscle it out in the vintage dirt track and motocross titles.
This is the next most popular meeting to the national championships.
The competition brings out the older style bikes, some as early as 1975.
In some ways they're dinosaurs, but a lot of people like that. You know, they go back to the old British thumpers. You know, we have some bikes that are pre-65 even. You know, and the oldest rider's 75 years old. And you know, they really do ride it with enthusiasm.
But after years of hard riding, some bikes may require a little attention if they're to make the starting lineup.
Up against their rivals yesterday, it was just marvellous for Newcastle. Of course, they were up against their enemies as part of a game of a local rugby league. And of course, Try after try was scored. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Charlestown had everyone right onto their minds when they were up against South Cardiff over the weekend. And of course, because of that, it was just exciting for them. It was just exciting for the teams. Both had to quickly score goals by kicking them as well. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The Knights know exactly what to do when they head off to Bruce Stadium this weekend. They have to take on the Raiders. And also, after the Raiders win over Wigan just about a couple of months ago, it's of course one that's been dominating the headlines over the past number of months. And of course, the Knights are hoping that there was no snow. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
The top of the table clash was just that early. The two hookers, Brett Clements and Adrian McNabb, coming to grips. While the Waratah Raid caught up with Curry lock John Jones as well. That cost the visitors 2 points, care of Rick Ryan's boot. But McNabb helped deliver another blow, this time on the scoreboard. Running off Stu Collins, he put lock Phil Morgan over, and it was 6-2. If you can't go through them, go over them. And a horror bounce for Waratah turned up perfectly for Danny Linane, who raced away untouched for Curry. 6-all. When John Jones smashed through the Tars' defence, he linked up for Linane's second, as the Bulldogs led by 6. The Cheetahs returned serve through second rower Jamie Johnson, and it was level once again. After half-time, Linane was again in the middle of things, offloading for Scott Kime to race away and make it 20-12. Curry eventually hanging on to win 26-24. Matthew Johns can clearly remember the day he was picked to make his first grade debut for Newcastle back in 1993. Even then, he was determined to be a one-team man, in the NRL at least, hence the decision to play out his career in England for Wigan.
You know, of course, things like the 97 grand final stand out, and I believe we can do it again this year, you know, and that's a great goal for me.
While the Northern Eagles headed the list of Australian clubs after Johns' signature, he also turned down the lure of rugby union. But it would always be hard to play against the red and blue. With state and Australian representation behind him, nothing beats the memory of 1997 and that grand final win, a feeling he'd desperately love to leave Newcastle with at the end of the year.
If we can do it, it'll just be a dream come true.
As for his return, nothing's planned past his 2-year deal with Wigan.
You just never know. I might go over there and we just absolutely love it and set it and that become home.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
But with David Hill still the CEO of the Newcastle Breakers, it's also struggling for the team with now its members leaving the club. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
With a host of talent scouts watching on, Mussarook winger Adrian Train was on the right track early, scoring Northern's first. Another soon after had an 8-point lead, but missed opportunities were the real feature of the opening half, with Northern to be later haunted by them. After the break, a clever kick by Curry's Christian Berry and great work by lock Heath Jackie had the Tweed Rivers teenager over for his second. But a 12-0 lead was dragged back in a great comeback that started with Ben Dulles' pass to fullback Brett Stewart, who raced away to score. Luck continued to bounce Southern's way, with hooker Sean Byram grabbing another to get back within 2 points. The match winner was to come minutes before full time, with Stewart again in the thick of things, caught just short of the line before Matthew Gallagher made sure of it for a Southern win, 14 points to 12. To the state team selected, and Northern has 5 players selected, including Jermaine Ale and Josh Sams, while Western is represented by Joe Wilson and Peter Taylor. Of the 20-man squad to contest the national championships in Port Macquarie next month, Sydney dominates the squad.
The Matildas went into the game desperate for a win, and it showed. Their early pressure paid off, with Sharon Black nailing her first. New Zealand wasn't without its chances, most of them coming from set plays. But it was more desperate work again from the Matildas' Sharon Black, who bagged her second. On a roll, and with New Zealand's defence in tatters, a magic moment for Newcastle's Sonny Hughes, lobbing an out-of-position keeper in spectacular fashion and in front of a home crowd. On the half-hour mark, Sharon Black found the back of the net for the third time, putting the Matildas up 4-0. The frustration got to Kiwi captain Wendy Henderson, who earned a yellow card. New Zealand tightened up in a scoreless second half, characterised by some great saves from both keepers. The match finished 4-0 to the Matildas. They'll meet the USA at Breakers Stadium on Sunday. Blake Doyle, NBN News. As Nova Peris Kneebone was carrying the flame at the start of its Australian journey, an Olympic cauldron was being unveiled in Newcastle. The cauldron is one of 187 in Australia being installed in cities and towns along the relay route.
It'll leave a legacy of the Newcastle's involvement in the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games.
On hand at the launch, Newcastle's own Olympic softballer Natalie Ward, just 100 days out from her second Games.
As an athlete, we're certainly going to be doing the most to make this country proud.
The torch will arrive from the north into Newcastle, where it will stay overnight. From Newcastle, it'll go to Spears Point, to the Central Coast, to Cessnock and Maitland, then through the Upper Hunter. It all starts on the 27th of August, which also happens to be NRL Grand Final Day. Torch relay organisers are hoping the two don't clash if Newcastle makes the big game.
Certainly hoping the Knights make the grand final. It'll be a very interesting one to balance, but the 27th of August when the torch arrives, which is grand final day, so we'll have a very interesting competition between the torch and the grand final.
Blake Doyle, NBN News.
To the country high school championships, and Western were knocked out by Sydney 38-6, while Northern was edged out by Southern 28-26. And of course, Northern scored first, and then scored back-to-back tries before everything went bad to worse. Meanwhile, Northern still represented its state team. And of course, that includes everyone in Newcastle and the Hunter. Congley McLeod, NBN News. Now the tips of rugby league. Here's the word from the chief himself, Paul Harrigan.
Well, all those people who jumped on the bandwagon for the third state of origin to be called off if it's a dead rubber will now realise that the third game is nearly always the best, despite whether the series is already wrapped up or not. It was an historic, record-breaking match for the Blues, which justified the third game should always be there. Queensland certainly will be hurting and will already be looking to next year, but one thing that they must look at is that in the last 20 years, New South Wales have always predominantly had the best team on paper. It was just that competitive spirit and hatred that the Maroons carried into the game which made the difference. Next year, nothing will change. New South Wales will have the better team. It will just depend on whether Queensland can get that raw passion back, that Queenslander call that made them so dominant in the past. Now to the plays of the week, and Clinton O'Brien gave an early welcome to the Brisbane Broncos last weekend, and Broncos rookie Carl Webb got 3 weeks for this tackle on Paul Rahihi, while Scott Logan was amongst a few players who earned 2 weeks for their troubles for head-eye tackles last weekend.
Tips for round 19, and it seems like every week it's getting harder to predict. West Tigers take on the Dragons, and the deciding factor will be whether the Dragons have really turned the corner after last week's victory. West beat them back in round 6, and the Dragons have lost 6 from 8 away. I've tipped the Tigers. Penrith, Broncos, Roosters and the Knights to win their games, while in other close matches, the Northern Eagles and Parramatta, the Eagles have won 3 from 4 at Brookvale. I've tipped them. And the Bulldogs v the Sharks, the Dogs to win at home. I'll see you next week. Back to you, Rabs.
The early signs looked ominous for Japan, the USA on the attack but unable to convert pressure into points. The woodwork not helping things on one occasion. But from a set play, the USA had all the moves, with Brandy Chaston passing inside for Cindy Parlow, and it was 1-0. Japan's answer was as swift as it was superb, with Yumi Obi firing a 35-metre shot that surprised keeper Jen Brenham, shocked the crowd and sent the Japanese team into celebrations. But there was still plenty of football to come. After half-time, the USA stepped up its assault, Shannon McMillan pouncing on a half chance to land the USA a 2-1 lead. There was nothing chancy about this goal. Brenda Chaston's free kick dead on target as the world champs showed their class. Another goal just before full-time to Ali Wagner ended it at 4-1. Earlier in the night, Canada scored an incredible victory against world number 2 China. Forced into a penalty shootout after remaining 2-2 after extra time, the Canadians got the break early when Nicole Wright saved Japan's first attempt. The two continued to exchange goals before China thought it got back on level terms after a save, but the referee gave the Canadians another shot from the spot in controversial circumstances, and Isabel Harvey made no mistake the second time around. There are 2 more games tomorrow while Australia play USA on Sunday.
Melissa Wilson is the epitome of determination. A car accident 8 years ago left her with brain damage, but she's turned tragedy into triumph. Having started swimming as part of her rehabilitation process, Melissa is now one of the world's best S4 swimmers. At the recent European Championships, she won 4 golds, 5 silvers and 1 bronze medal. The 19-year-old also qualified for a 5th Paralympic event, the 150-metre medley, shaving 4 seconds off her personal best and becoming the world number 2.
It'll be the first Paralympics that I've been to, so yeah. It's been really wonderful, and competing in front of the home country will be awesome.
Melissa will also compete in the 50 metres backstroke and the 50, 100 and 200 freestyle events.
My goal is to win a medal in the 50 backstroke and the 150 medley, and I hope to do really well in other swims.
Yeah, she is a definite medal chance. I don't think she needs to make huge improvements to get herself to within medal contention.
For Melissa, becoming a champion swimmer has been nothing but hard work.
Oh yes, hey, Peter here trained me real hard.
Kylie Colvin, NBN News.
Justin Lee has won this event twice, in 1994 and 1998, but his chance for a third win went in the semi-final when his leg rope broke. He tried desperately to make up for lost time, but couldn't catch the likes of Andy Brinkworth and Paul Parks. Parks winning the semi, with Brinkworth also reaching the decider, but the title went to current Newcastle Open champ Stu McCall on a countback for the second successive year. To Speedway, and the last event for the Newcastle season is in action tonight at Tomago. Heats for the National East Coast Classic and car title and the Strength Stockers were run last night with finals action highlighting tonight's meeting. Warm hands of welcome on a cold day at Breakers Stadium as Australia lined up against the world champions and a side it had never beaten. Despite the rain, the way America started indicated the drought wasn't going to break today. Goalie Tracy Wheeler kept the USA at bay once, and then twice, with a touch to the bar denying the Americans again and left the world champs wondering what they had to do. Sharon Black had the Matildas' best opportunity in the second half, but couldn't sneak it past the US. This game was to be decided on a penalty after hometown girl Cheryl Salisbury was fouled for an accidental handball in the penalty area. Shannon McMillan took the shot from the spot. The USA 1-0 winners, equaling Australia's best ever result against them, but enough for the world champs to win the Pacific Cup. Recovering from 2 games in the space of 5 days, Andrew Johns had every right to be sore, but it was the loss that ached the most.
Be in it for so long and lose it, it hurts a bit.
But he was happy with his brother Matthew's decision to head over to England and play out his career with Wigan. Just what the halfback will do, though, still isn't known.
I'm sure he'll be successful and hopefully come back here and maybe coach or be some role in the club, and I'm still playing if I stay here.
Given his representative commitments and the speculation on his future, Andrew is just keen to give his brother the perfect farewell.
It's been pretty stressful, and I've really started to feel the pressure, but I suppose if the way I could repay him is really knuckle down and really hit form coming into the semis and give him a premiership to leave with.
Prop Josh Perry left Bruce Stadium last night shouldering other problems, but the teenager doesn't think he'll miss any football. Winger Lenny Beckett has seen plenty of that in recent weeks, and last night picked up 2 tries for his trouble. With Darren Albert still some time off a return, Beckett keeps making the most of it.
Yeah, it's my job. I just got to be ready to make sure, take the opportunities and just enjoy the time that I got up there.
Meanwhile, props Matt Parsons and Glenn Greig for good chances to make returns this week from respective knee injuries.
After starting out as a gymnast, Matthew Helm turned to diving and, under the guidance of Eric Brooker, has matured into the region's latest athlete, set to compete at Sydney 2000. Seen here as fresh-faced 14-year-old, Helm won state and national junior titles and competed at the World Junior Championships before winning a scholarship in 1995 and moving to Brisbane. Helm will compete in the 10-metre platform and 10-metre synchronised events. Meanwhile, the last day of the State Gymnastics Championships wrapped up today. In the women's division, it was Level 8 competitor Lara Ware who managed to get the best results for the Hunter, earning Nationals selection. And in the men's Level 8 competitor, Kyle Thompson recorded the best local result, earning a first place on the bars and second on the parallel bars. Both will go to Adelaide next month for the national titles. And also at Broadmeadow, the state finals in inline hockey was contested, with Newcastle emerging victorious over Shoalhaven. In the main match, the under-19s, Newcastle put away 8 goals to Shoalhaven's 3. The event is used as a selection for a state team to compete in the Nationals at Melbourne in October. A large portion of the Hunter teams from each of the 5 age divisions were named today, selected after 4 days of competition. Adam Harper, NBN News.
The Acropolis Rally has a reputation for breaking cars, and it did its darndest to destroy Michael Guess. Rocky roads on the second day left the Australian limping 20 kilometres on 3 wheels to finish a stage, and then a further 16 to get it replaced.
What you see behind me here is just an example of what can go wrong.
With the damage fixed just in time, Guest and navigator David Green were back on the road, finishing the day in second in their 2-wheel drive 2-litre class and maintaining that position until the end of the rally.
The Acropolis has turned out to be everything that we expected, rough and tough, and it's just decimated a field of top-class drivers, and it's great to be one of the ones who have made it to the finish.
Guest has now had a first and a second in his 3 events for Hyundai. His next will be the Rally of Finland in August and in the top World Rally Car class.
It was hoped today John Palmer, a director of property company True Blue, would announce he wants to purchase the club with the backing of Soccer Australia. However, it was club CEO Maurice McAllister who fronted the media to outline the deal struck between True Blue and the old consortium, owed around $1.25 million from that deal with David Hall. According to McAllister, the old consortium that had sold the club to Hall, in fact, still owns it, with True Blue to buy them out over a 2-year period, so long as Soccer Australia boss Stefan Kamaz gives the green light. But what is certain, David Hall no longer has anything to do with the club or True Blue.
Well, he was bought out completely.
The hundreds of thousands of dollars he left owed to creditors will now be picked up by True Blue.
We'll be sending out letters this week, and I'm sure that all our creditors will be paid within 6 weeks.
A 6-member board will be formed with 2 of the old consortium invited on, but one-time club chairman Bill Collins ruled out today that he'd take on the role once again. In the most positive sign of all, coach Lee Sterry has begun player negotiations, already meeting with Sydney-based players. Sterry will hold a team meeting in Newcastle tomorrow.
Basketball was, of course, played up at the Newcastle Basketball Stadium at Broadmeadow, and of course various teams from across local high schools had to test their skills. And of course, thankfully, Newcastle had to win. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
At 35, Michael Hagan admits his rise up the coaching ranks has come quicker than expected. But next season, he'll not only be one of the youngest coaches in the NRL, he'll be the first former Knights player to coach Newcastle, an honour he hopes to repay in results.
It's a very special achievement for me to get this far, but I don't think that the job's not done just at the moment.
Starting his coaching apprenticeship at Canberra and most recently with Newcastle's First Division side, Hagan knows the step to the top grade will be a real baptism of fire, considering the parochial nature of the Newcastle supporters. As captain, Hagan led Newcastle to its first ever semi-final campaign in 1992. Ironically, that included a win against the Warren Ryan-coached Western Suburbs side. But as coach, he knows anything but a semi-final berth would be a failure. His job at Newcastle, though, will stretch much further than just first grade.
We're looking forward to having somebody on board that's going to take an interest in our lower grades and also assist in the overall methodology and how we coach right throughout the club.
He's also keen to encourage more former players back to the club in various roles, but one of his main concerns is to retain Andrew Johns, a player who had backed Hagan to be coach.
Put it this way, I'm a strong supporter of his too.
But there's still no word on what the halfback will do. Jim Callanan, NBN News. Soccer Australia has come under fire this week for a perceived lack of urgency in giving its approval on a deal that would see property company True Blue take control of the Breakers. But despite repeated attempts to acquire it, the Cone's governing body is still to see all the relevant documentation on the deal that saw former owner David Hall hand over control to a company he was a director and a shareholder of. Soccer Australia boss Stefan Kamaz will meet True Blue director John Palmer tomorrow to try and clear up the situation before reporting back to his board. Meanwhile, Lee Sterry is up for the Coach of the Year gong tonight at the NSL Awards ceremony. Striker John Bonavolia has been nominated for Player of the Year and Bob Catlin as goalkeeper of the 1999-2000 season. Robbie Andrzejewski is a contender for the Youth Player Award, while the club could also win the Fair Play Award, which goes to the side with the least amount of bookings for foul play in a season. In the NBN Soccer League, one game tomorrow, while on Sunday, the feature is the clash between competition leaders Edgeworth and premiers Hamilton. In Newcastle Rugby League, it's a Coalfields clash at Curry tomorrow, while the 2 grand finalists from last season, West and Cessnock, come head-to-head on Sunday. And in round 10 of Newcastle Rugby Union, Eastern Districts, the Tars, Merriweather and the Wanderers are all at home. It's that last-second World Championship winning shot by Sherelle McMahon that has lasted long in the memory of many Australians, yet lingers on for New Zealand. But last upstarts mean little tomorrow night.
You certainly don't bring your scrapbook to a new year.
As far as the Kiwis are concerned, what's in the past can stay there.
I don't think it's about revenge. That's been and gone, really. And like right now, two different teams, two different lineups anyway. So, no, there's nothing that can be done about that.
Both sides have changed lineups since that World Championship final, the Kiwis especially, with former South African captain Irene van Dijk, now a silver fern. She's never beaten the Aussies and would love to break that duck tomorrow night.
Yes, it's going to be a big one. Always playing Australia is going to be tough.
One thing is for sure, the Kiwis' tall timber in the goal circle will give Australia one of its toughest tasks yet.
I just think it adds that exciting element, and I know for our players and myself it's a challenge.
The Kiwis are actually defending the Trans-Tasman Trophy, but with a sellout crowd to cheer the Aussies on, it just may stay this side of the creek, alongside the World Cup as well. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Deep in the heart of the Bank Corner boxing gym, Stevie Hughes prepares for a shot at a state title. In 2 days' time, he'll put the countless hours of training to the test against Wollongong's Wade Clout, and no, that isn't his nickname.
He's a nice boxer, but he's going to come down here and really want to, take the title back to Wollongong, and let's not let him do it.
The 32-year-old goes into the bout with 8 wins from 14 fights, the last against Queenslander Mick Betros in March. One of his losses, though, was 2 years ago against Clout, but as far as Hughes is concerned, that's ancient history.
Back then I didn't really have my mind on the job, I just wanted to get in there and get out straight away, which happened. But this time I want to fight and I want to win.
And it's not just the training which keeps Hughes fit, he's also raising 2 young children.
It's not much difference, really. Except I can't win with them.
The battle begins on Friday night at Mayfield Ex-Services Club.
Waratah Mayfield were chasing after their rivals up in the Newcastle Rugby League. Of course, their rivals had a win. Congo and McLeod, NBN News.
When the Olympic torch run makes its way to Lake Macquarie, it'll be used to light this cauldron, and from it, Olympic torches used in the region will then be lit. A number of former Lake Macquarie Olympians and some possible future ones will be taking part.
It'll be probably one of the slowest Ks that I'll run in my lifetime to soak up the atmosphere a bit. Just being part of the Olympics rekindles a lot of old memories from 1988.
I only wish I was a little bit younger so I could compete in Sydney, but I'm looking forward to going down and watching the whole spectacle.
The State Inline Hockey Championship started today in Newcastle with no less than 16 games to be contested each day through to Sunday, with the finals on Monday. Divisions range from under-13s through to senior ranks. Saturday's top-of-the-table Newcastle Rugby League clash between Curry and Waratah Mayfield highlights Tooheys Cup action this weekend. The round starts tonight at Harker Oval with the Rosellas hosting Maitland. And round 16 of the NBN Soccer League starts tomorrow with Broadmeadow up against Adamstown, while on Sunday Toronto play Western. The Bell Swans take on Cessnock and Wallsend meet Maitland. The Gunners line up against Edgeworth, and Hamilton is home to Highfields. It's the biggest match of the season for these players, and Lower Hunter was out to make sure it was a memorable one. They were beaten by Maitland Coalfields in the inaugural match last year, and when fullback Matthew McCarthy crossed, it looked like they may do it again. But Lower Hunter came good, with winger Nan Wakalam finishing off in the corner for the first of his 2 tries for the game. The Lambton winger was involved in another when he linked up with hooker Danny Bailey, who in turn put halfback Max Fox over as Lower Hunter began taking control. The same couldn't be said for the visitors. When it came to kicking, though, Aaron Clack had it all, slogging 2 conversions and showing great soccer skills to find his way over for a 4-pointer and help Lower Hunter to a 32-16 win. To Newcastle Rugby League, and Curry sits out in front on 16 points, ahead of Waratah and Cessnock, while the Northern Blues fell back out of the top 5. Macquarie is yet to earn a point.
A 12-year-old boy is up at the John Hunter Hospital tonight after he was bashed by a few teenage boys right up at a home. Now, the 12-year-old was having a dinner alongside his grandmother when right up at a park when he was assaulted. And a warning, some viewers may find this story confronting.
Chris Crampton was drinking from a cup held by his mother today, unable to feed himself with 2 broken arms. The 12-year-old from Singleton was severely beaten at a park near his home, where he'd gone to play with his younger brother Josh yesterday afternoon. Alone for a few minutes, Chris was jumped on from behind.
2 teenage boys bashing me up, and I was knocked out for a while.
Josh returned to find his brother lying on the ground and dragged Chris 200 metres to their home.
Very bruised there, my brain's bruised a bit. I had 2 broken bones in my left arm and 1 broken bone in my right arm. I just thought that I was going to die.
There's bruising to the left side of his brain, but a CAT scan has cleared Chris of any brain damage. Police are looking for 2 boys aged around 16 years old who were seen at the park at the time of the incident. They're both described as having shoulder-length brown hair. One was wearing a white long-sleeve top.
It was broad daylight, houses all around. You think people would be around in the middle of the afternoon on a Sunday afternoon, but apparently not.
The assault has shocked the close community and left a distressed mother with an unanswered question.
I would like to know why.
Catherine Turner, NBN News.
Props Glenn Grief and Matt Parsons have sat out the best part of a month with knee injuries and will have to come back through First Division before returning to the top side.
They're better served by grabbing a big slice of reserve grade rather than doing a 10-minute rotation in first grade.
But still, it's off-field news that features in the Knights camp, with speculation the decision on the new coach will be made this week.
I would hope this week might pull up a lot of those issues, but I can't guarantee that.
The club is waiting to hear just what Andrew Johns will decide, while others wait to even get an offer, like up-and-coming star Lenny Beckett.
I do want to stay at the Knights, and I'm not sure what's happening there, so I don't think I'll find a better place than Newcastle.
One of Newcastle's most consistent players this season, he's making the most of Darren Albert's absence through injury. Both Albert and Robbie O'Davis have been told to rest their foot injuries to recover in time for the semi-finals.
That's the thinking, that if they just give it a bit more time, it might just heal a little bit more, and it gives them a chance to time their run at the bigger games.
The team to play the Northern Eagles on Saturday has changed little, with Sean Rudder remaining at 5/8. Steve Simpson and Josh Perry are expected to recover from shoulder problems, while Ben Donaldson comes onto the bench to allow Danny Medeiros to play a more flexible role in the side.
2 weeks ago, an emotional Lee Sterry held grave fears for the club's future. Now he hopes it's turned the corner. Today, the coach began contract talks with the likes of Chris Tancheski, Brad Wicherak and Mark Wilson. And tonight he's briefing players about the structure of the club. He thinks that player loyalty is still there.
As I said in the past, nobody can accuse any of us, even from me down, of being unloyal to Newcastle Breakers. We've all hung around while all this mess has been going on.
The task of attracting and retaining players is all happening much later than Sterry would have liked, and he's hoping Soccer Australia will soon give the club's new ownership the thumbs up.
Been given a budget, but at the end of the day, I've been given a budget by new owners, and it hasn't been endorsed by Soccer Australia. So, again, I'm sort of swinging in the breeze a bit, and but I've got, at least half a dozen players I've spoken to who are keen to come to the club if I'm here.
Soccer Australia, meanwhile, says it's still waiting on documentation from True Blue. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
Below the fishermen and the gentle surge of the ocean at Tomaree Head are millions of tiny abalone larvae struggling to survive. They've been put there by staff from the Port Stephens Fisheries Research Station who've had a breakthrough in producing the rare baby molluscs outside their normal breeding season.
Now we are able to produce larvae all year round, which means that we can now seed the wild stock. Here in the Tomaree Peninsula, we're putting in over 10 million larvae of abalone.
It's small reefs and rocky outcrops like this one that Fisheries is seeding. But it's no short-term project, with the abalone taking up to 6 years to mature. Abalone stocks have fallen by half over the last decade, with New South Wales harvesting just 300 tonnes a year, most for export to Asia. Researchers believe they've uncovered the simple secret that will allow stocks to replenish.
It's a matter of put them at the right temperature, keep them in very good quality water. They're an oceanic species, they need that good quality water, they need the right food. Those three ingredients is all you need.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The Bill Turner Cup has become huge for Newcastle, Hunter and Lake Macquarie players. And of course, overnight, it was just huge for a few teams. Maytime Belmont secured a 5-4 win over Whitebridge, while Cessnock defeated Mount View 4-1. And Lambton defeated Merewether 2-1. Conley McLeod, NBN News.
The Newcastle Knights have one of the largest supporter bases in the league, but only 1,100 members. Today they embarked on a push for 10,000.
In the first instance, and importantly, they can claim to be proud, passionate and part of the team. These members will have a voice in the future of the Newcastle Knights.
The membership comes at various levels with numerous benefits. It also provides obvious financial benefits for the Knights, as well as tangible evidence of its supporter numbers for lobbying sponsors or the government. The push steps up on NBN's footy show later tonight. Meanwhile, the Knights aren't about to confirm or deny reports that ex-captain Michael Hagan has won the role as first-grade coach.
We're not commenting on the speculation at this stage. We have to make an announcement very soon. There are just a couple of loose ends to tidy up.
The man himself was at training this afternoon. An announcement is expected tomorrow. Still on, the NRL and the Northern Eagles have gone back to school in a quest to turn a bad run of results around, spending time with fans at Sydney's Beacon Hill High.
Made this huge flag that they bring to all of our games, and we just wanted to come along and show them that we appreciate their support.
The Eagles play the Knights at Marathon Stadium on Saturday.
Danny Badiris has all but extended his Knights contract to a 2-year deal. Because of that, the Knights are doing absolutely well for the year 2000. And also, despite the loss to the Northern Eagles, the Knights are hoping to get into semi-finals glory, as Jim Callanan reports.
Touted as a future representative star and chased by other clubs, Badiris was seen as one of Newcastle's key signings. And after weeks of speculation, the hooker today agreed to terms on a 2-year deal. The hooker played in the first round encounter against the Northern Eagles that saw the merged club upset the Knights, and it's hardly been forgotten by either club.
It's probably one of our best wins of the year against Newcastle, and really we haven't lived up to expectation after that. So hopefully on the weekend we can put a good performance together and hopefully not beat Newcastle, which not too many teams do.
Mate, it does. You know, they got us here in round one, and we're very keen to reverse that here.
Coach Warren Ryan would rather make up for last weekend's loss to the Raiders.
I'd say this one against the Eagles will get a little bit better possession here on our home ground. I couldn't imagine us going without a penalty on our home ground.
Winger Adam McDougall has missed training all week to help recover from what's been a hectic few weeks of football, but is expected to play. And injured fullback Robbie O'Davis holds hope he'll be back sooner rather than later from a foot injury.
I'm given every possible chance I can to play, and total outcome's going to be this Monday. So, yeah.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
To Newcastle Rugby League and Western Suburbs were too strong for the Cessnock Goannas, defeating them with a huge win. It was just massive for West, as Jim Callanan reports.
The clash between last year's grand finalists belied its match of the round status early, with mistakes littering the early exchanges, although the defence was on the mark. It wasn't until midway through the first half that Cessnock got things together with a well-worked try finished off by 5'8" Craig Wise. Ill discipline cost the home side another 2 points before they got on the board through fullback Scott Bradley. Then lock Anthony Pauling weighed in, finding some wanting Cessnock defence out wide. He linked up with halfback Craig Kamali. The West number 7 helping the Rosellas to a 10-8 half-time lead. After the break, it all came down to defence, with neither side giving an inch. While Wests did have early opportunities, the game breaker didn't come until 10 minutes from full time, when second rower Scott Conley gave winger Garth Ross a clean run to the line. Bradley's conversion and a late try sealed a 20-8 win. A board favourite Massive in the second race at Kembla Grange yesterday, Robinson had it all but won when he got a ride he didn't bargain for. The champion Newcastle Hoop was thrown heavily but escaped without serious injury. Meanwhile, a 4-horse pile-up marred the feature New South Wales Sire Stakes race for 3-year-olds at Newcastle last night. All drivers and horses were okay. Bondi Billy went on to win the event and qualify for the Rich Final. On crutches and out of football for at least 4 weeks. It's a far cry from state of origin glory, but for Ben Kennedy it's reality after tearing ankle ligaments on Wednesday night.
If it tears, it can mean my season and maybe a lot longer, and it'll mean if it tore, probably screws through my ankles and things like that, so I don't want to go through that.
On top of that, the one-time Raider misses the chance to return to Canberra in Newcastle colours. While not running at tonight's training, centre Matt Gidley will play despite his calf muscle injury.
It's improved already, a fair bit from yesterday, so, I'll be sweet for Sunday.
Gidley hopes to have a run tomorrow in Canberra as all players get used to Sean Rudder at 5'8".
Yeah, he was a half for all his junior footy, so I think he'll be right. I mean, he's got one of the best there to help him out. Joey play halfback this week, so, Joey will help him out.
Prop Paul Rahihi comes back into the side as well for Matt Parsons, who's still troubled by a knee injury, while lock Bill Peden and Tamana Tahu sat out training today with a dose of the flu, but both are expected to play. Either way, it'll be cold reception at Bruce Stadium on Sunday night, a place Newcastle has never won at, but that means little to Canberra.
No, it doesn't. We know that they're a very good side. We know that they're going to play out the 80 minutes and test us.
Meanwhile, it's expected Matthew Johns' playing future will be revealed next week. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The Northern Eagles and Parramatta had a game which, of course, didn't quite go according to plan. But out of it, the Eels had a player sent off, which led to the Northern Eagles scoring. There were plenty of tries that had to be scored right up into Group 4 Rugby League. And of course, it wasn't just that. And of course, Narrabri were home, right up against their rivals. And of course, the home team scored right throughout the entire game and won it, fair and square.
While the Northern Blues had been playing on it for a while, the Tomaree ground was officially open today, with the home side grabbing an early lead. The Blues left their mark in other ways as well, with bruising runs that have made them one of the toughest teams in the competition. But when Rosella centre Gavin Cook plucked one out, it swung West's way as the visitors went up 6-2. He then saved one with another intercept, this time on his own line. Another 2 points got Wests a 6-point buffer. That lead soon doubled after hooker Ryan Dagwell started things with a trademark run before Gavin Cook made an all-too-familiar path to the line as well. Scott Bradley's conversion was spot on too. The Blues bounced back before the break, but they couldn't catch West after half-time, going down by 4.
It's a dangerous thing to do on the roads, but also up in Newcastle, there was only one thing that could happen, and that of course was motor racing between the bikes, the cars, and of course, whatever could happen, and of course whoever could win can secure a place. But of course, despite the drama, there was also a lot of good intention. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
As state and national champions, Warners Bay could have been expected to cruise through the quarter-final against Sydney's Erskine Park, but that wasn't the case. A scrappy first half saw the title holders trail by 2 at the break, most of their points coming from free throws. The Bay picked up the pace in the second, but Erskine stayed in touch, and with less than a minute left on the clock, the side needed this three-pointer to draw level. Another free throw put the result beyond doubt, Warners Bay winning 46-42 and later going through to tomorrow's final. There it'll face the in-form Westfield, which earlier dashed the hopes of another Hunter team. Trailing 36-23 at half-time, Newcastle needed to produce something special in the second to beat the fancied Sydney Siders, and despite some moments of brilliance, it wasn't to be. Meanwhile, no luck for Northern New South Wales teams in the girls' draw. Arara and Gosford both recorded solid wins in the quarter-finals, but couldn't progress past the semis. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
Watching on today from the stands with injury, it's the lure of a lucrative English deal that has Peter Shields' days as a Knight numbered.
It was an opportunity I just have to take.
So good, Shields asked for and was granted a release from his contract to begin a 3-year deal at St Helens next season.
It's an opportunity I could not miss, and also it just frees up a bit of money to retain some of the younger guys, which the club, obviously need to do.
At St Helens, he'll be just down the road from Matthew Johns at Wigan.
I think we're going to get plenty of opportunities to play against each other. So I played against Matty a couple of times when I was at Perth, so we've had a few battles.
Meanwhile, Newcastle Breakers goalkeeper Bob Catlin has won the National Soccer League Keeper of the Year award. Catlin was a popular choice for the award after recording 7 clean sheets and letting in just 43 goals in 36 games last season. Lee Sterry, John Bonavoli and Robbie Andrzejewski missed out on their awards, but the club won the Fair Play award.
A lot of superbikes got underway in Newcastle today as part of a round full of Northern New South Wales riders from Newcastle to the North Coast. And of course, it was part of a ride in the Hunter Valley, but also there was a lot of disasters. One rider taken to hospital following this. While the rest of it continued. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
Given the uncertainty in recent weeks around the Newcastle Breakers, the signing of John Bonavoli for 3 years comes as a breath of fresh air for the club. The pint-sized striker equalled the club record, hitting 16 goals last season, and his combination up front with Andy Harper proved one of the most deadly in the league. Harper met with new owner John Palmer today and hopes to take up his 1-year option to play with the club this season before a possible move into an administration role at the club. And news late today that Wollongong's Asala Massey is close to signing a 2-year deal with the club. The Wolves striker met with coach Lee Sterry this afternoon, just hours before the coach flew out to America to look over a deal. Of the Newcastle-based players, Brad Widgerek and Andy Roberts have agreed to terms, but it's understood teenage striker Chris Tancheski is looking for a new club. And in NBN Soccer League, Hamilton moved to within 2 points of Edgeworth on the competition ladder after it ended the Eagles' unbeaten run in round 17 action. A classic right-foot strike by Rob Mooney in the 20th minute clinched a 2-goal win. But plenty of praise too for Olympic goalkeeper Liam Baker, who maintained Hamilton's lead with some classic saves.
The only thing you have to do is, of course, play a lot of rugby with your teammates up in the Newcastle competition. And of course, it became one of them. And of course, tries had to be scored by both teams. Colin McLeod, NBN News.
2 tries, another man of the match performance at the weekend, and off contract. It's no secret that Adam McDougall is hot property. But the winger still can't understand why he hasn't been offered a deal he says comes close to what he'd stay for.
At this stage, I'm still probably, my middle name's limbo at the moment. I don't know if I'm coming or going, so it's been pretty hard to focus just on football, and I'm sort of really keen to put it behind me.
His manager meets with the Knights tomorrow, but it's unlikely to end in McDougall's signing.
There's talks of some sort of compromise needing to be made, but I was hoping not so much a compromise had to be made. I was just hoping that we could come to an agreeable and amicable sort of a deal.
One player happy to have his deal done is hooker Danny Badiris, who's agreed to a 2-year term.
Well, it was pretty hectic leading up to last week. It's just great to get it all over and done with.
Most of the team played at Tony Butterfield's testimonial day at Belmont, while the man himself was hard at work. But it's a perfect send-off at the season's end that the players want to give in return.
Yeah, there's a bit of a snowball effect happening now, and there's a couple of big scores on the weekend. We've got a lot of Friday night games coming up.
As for the team, no serious injuries arose from Saturday's 32-point win over the Eagles. Don't get too many chances to beat the world champions, and New Zealand know this could be its best opportunity for some time to knock off the Australians. The Aussies lost 5 players after last year's World Championship win and have 2 debutants tonight in a huge litmus test of their ability at the top level.
Yes, absolutely, and I think it's great. Although we don't have the experience that we had last year, we do have the skill.
For Central Coast's Megan Anderson, it's a dream come true. While she'll play second fiddle to Australia's goal-shooting star Sharelle McMahon, this will be her first start in the top Australian side.
If you're only going to play one test for Australia, to be against New Zealand, and it's close to my home, so all my family can come, so it's perfect.
Alex Hodge will have her first start as well, while it's a debut of sorts for Catherine Harvey. Tonight's test, her first as skipper.
It's been a dream of mine for a long time, and for it to come to reality and to fruition tonight, then it's going to be a special moment for me, but hopefully a memorable one by winning the game.
It's the same idea her opposing skipper Bernice Manny has. She's just won back the captaincy of the Silver Ferns.
Every time we take the court against Australia, it's the ultimate match, really.
A sellout crowd of 5,000 will make sure it's a memorable one. Jim Callanan, NBN News. 12,500 power customers across Lake Macquarie started their day without a hot cuppa, and this message from Energy Australia.
Faults have been reported in the following suburbs: Argenton, Barnsley, Bolton Point, Boolaroo, Booragul.
More than a dozen suburbs were affected when substations at Boolaroo and Mount Hutton were shut down. The cause, a feeder cable in the bush at Fassifern, sabotaged.
Due to persons unknown throwing a steel wire over the high voltage mains, which, as you'd imagine, is an extremely risky practice.
Hundreds of businesses were also affected, the inconvenience for staff at this Warners Bay cafe typical of the widespread frustration.
We sell a lot of coffees of a morning. We couldn't sell any coffees. We couldn't make them. Couldn't make any breakfasts. No sandwich, no takeaways. Basically, we were forced to shut the shop.
This is an act of criminal damage to our equipment, but I'd like to emphasise the safety aspects. If people do see any unusual circumstances or activity around our assets, please give us a call.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Attending students at Rutherford Technology High School found themselves the centre of attention today, all of it unwanted. A group of about 20 students, mostly from Year 11, are striking classes because they say teachers are seeking out certain people for punishment.
We're here just to say that the Department of Education have to have a real look at the way their students are being treated in every school.
The girls are adamant it's not about a ban on kissing and smoking, but about equal disciplinary measures for those breaking the rules.
We don't want to change the rules, we just want to stop the rules from being bent because different circumstances, different people, you know.
There's been no shortage of criticism, the Minister for Education making his stance on the matter perfectly clear.
If these young people who are beyond the compulsory school age don't like to abide by the standards and values of that school, well then they can get out of the school.
Rutherford High's principal says she doesn't object to students voicing their opinion as long as it's not to the detriment of others. The students will meet with the principal and a representative from the Department of Education on Monday. In the meantime, there's anger over disruption to the school and damage to its reputation.
What they're doing is wrong, and what they're saying doesn't represent what the majority think in this school.
How can they bring down a school like they have?
If they're not here for teaching and learning and they're disrupting the learning of others, I will have to follow down the school's discipline code.
Which could mean eventual expulsion for those who don't conform. Catherine Turner, NBN News.
Just like many soccer clubs, it was back in the Bill Turner Cup today, and of course it's where Merewether and Northampton, as well as a few other Newcastle and Hunter clubs battled it out to go through to the finals. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
Still a teenager, Tamana Tahu has scored almost as many tries this season as his age, but he's still 3 short of the Dragons' Nathan Blacklock. The St George Illawarra speedster has chalked up 17 so far this season, and he's on track to equal legend Ken Irvine's record of topping the leading try scorers list in successive seasons. All that can stop him, it seems, is Tahu.
It's a long season, and there's 6 more games, and you never know, Tamana might overtake me.
Another great tussle will be in the halves, with Andrew Johns keen to lock horns with Dragons 5'8", Trent Barrett.
I'm looking forward to playing against Trent Barrett, although we're not in the same positions. I say we'll come up against each other, and he's probably the form half or 5'8" of the comp at the moment.
Ironically, Barrett has only just signed a 4-year deal with his club as well, but will actually be marked by Sean Rudder, who slots back to 5'8" for the injured Matty Johns. That leaves a bare-looking back row.
We've brought Troy Fletcher back in, and Ben Donaldson will come in as a replacement hooker. That'll release Danny Badeiras to do a little bit of work, possibly in the back row or wherever else he may be needed.
All the action will be live Sunday afternoon on NBN. After weeks of soul-searching, one of the most sought-after signatures in the world of rugby league was finally penned today.
I don't know if it would have felt the same, winning a premiership somewhere else.
With fiancée Renee and son Samuel watching on, and his manager John Fordham flanking him, Johns described how he came to his decision after getting a tip from his brother Matthew.
He just said, so one day you'll wake up and it'll be crystal clear what you have to do, and that was the case. On Thursday, I knew that I had to stay.
While incoming first-grade coach for next season, Michael Hagan, had some influence on the decision, Andrew was also enticed by the need for a greater role off the field as he becomes one of the most senior players.
We've got so many good young players coming through. If I can, give them a hand in making them better players and better people, then I know that over the next 4 years I'll finish pretty happy.
After first joining the club as a 15-year-old, the 4-year deal will complete 16 years' service to Newcastle, and he might yet get to finish that career with his brother in one way or another.
without doubt, I'd like to think that it will come back in some capacity here.
Meanwhile, the Knights held further discussions with Sean Rudder's manager today, while the English offer for David Fairley will be tough to beat.
He needs an answer by Monday at the latest, or Tuesday, so I've got to work pretty hard over this weekend to see how I can finalise some of the others.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The Knights cheerleaders are of course known for being the ones who love to entertain the audience. Right in front of the crowds, and also they're auditioning for brand new ones. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The Knights were up at the University of Newcastle congratulating one of their players, as well as congratulating Matthew Gidley as well.
I've been at uni studying nutrition for 4 years, and I haven't done the business side of things, and it's definitely it's just as important as learning the nutrition as well, yeah.
The Knights have a game in just a couple of days' time. Conklin McLeod at NBN News.
New South Wales Country has stamped its authority as a provincial rugby force in the first ever National Rugby Cup Series. And her skipper, Newcastle's David Lubin, set the perfect example against Darwin, scoring the Cockatoos' second try. Newcastle University's Warwick Crosby quickly picked up a third for the team as Country went about racking up a huge score. Wanderers' Julian Morton chipped in with the boot as Country won by 60. It heads off to Narrabri this weekend. And Central Coast Thundercat crew Aruna won the second round of the state series at Catherine Hill Bay at the weekend. Good conditions made for tight racing, with the Wayne Hunter-driven craft getting the win. Known as the buy of the season, Dave Fairley has played every game this year at Newcastle, but a torn hip flexor muscle will sideline him for at least this week.
Probably 2 games, which isn't good because I want to try and get through the year without missing one.
Playing future for next season, however, should be known within days as the Knights work to try and keep him from heading to St Helens with Peter Shields.
England want to know tonight, so hopefully, if not tonight, tomorrow, it can all be put to bed. And
teenager Tamana Tahu is relieved contract troubles are behind him. One of the Code's rising stars, his price tag is going up as well, but he's elected to stay for 1 more year at least.
Good feeling, yeah. These last 2 weeks, I've been having sleepless nights and that. I just worrying about my contract. And
talks with Adam McDougall, though, drag on.
Adam wasn't present, and I had requested that he be here. I've again sent the manager away with the same offer. We've made a substantial offer. I think that everybody should understand that we're offering more money than what he was currently on.
As for the side to play St George Illawarra at the weekend, Matthew Johns is named, but he's no certainty to play. That pushes the versatile Sean Rudder to the back row, while Matt Parsons and Glenn Grief are back in the squad, with Steve Simpson set to start after Fairley's withdrawal this afternoon. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The Trans-Tasman Cup match between the world number 2s and a new-look Australian side at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre was expected to be a tight tussle, and it was, in the first quarter at least. The 2 teams went shot for shot, World Championship hero Sherelle McMahon again doing the damage for the Aussies. New Zealand trailed by 2 at the start of the second, and that was as close as the visitors got, especially with Catherine Cox assuming Australia's goal-scoring duties. Cox and McMahon struck an instant rapport, helping the home side to a 10-point lead at half-time. The Kiwis responded with sweeping lineup changes, but the Aussies' greatest danger remained themselves. Liz Ellis and Catherine Harvey proved perfect in defence, allowing McMahon and Cox to concentrate on the job at hand. That domination continued in the final quarter, with the world champs going on to win by 23 points, a margin which surprised both coaches.
I am surprised, I must admit. I thought it would be a lot closer than that.
Pretty disappointed because, again, we just didn't play to the full potential.
Colin Baldwin, NBN News. Contract negotiations dominate the Knights' midweek agenda with Steve Simpson, Dave Fairley, Josh Perry, Billy Peaton and Sean Rudder all on the list, with Rudder said to be all but signed for another year. It's good news for the Knights, with the versatile player now becoming a regular in the starting squad.
I thought Sean's been playing so well that he is entitled to get a starting jumper. He did a terrific job at 5'8".
However, the Andrew Johns waiting game continues.
I have heard that he has a view now that it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg with who's going to come first. The other players are saying, well, when Andrew signs, we'll be more keener to sort of jump on board, maybe at a lesser rate than what they may demand.
Brother Matthew, meanwhile, completed training last night and now looks more likely to play on Sunday. A final decision on Dave Fairley's fitness is expected tomorrow. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
The Knights swapped the board today, and of course they had a lot of golf playing today, as well as having sandwiches as well. And of course they had a massive good time ahead of their clash, which starts on Sunday. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
When salary cap concerns claimed the scalp of Matthew Johns last month, speculation started that his brother may go with him. But that ended today, with Andrew signing on for a further 4 years. Talking exclusively about the deal with Matthew on tonight's footy show.
It's dragged on for a while, but I was glad to get it over and done with, and I'm happy to stay.
Brisbane and Wigan were touted as contenders for John's services, but in the end there was only one option. Born and bred in the Hunter, Andrew rose through the Knights' ranks to country, state and national honours, the halfback winning a grand final, 2 Dally M awards and being hailed as the world's best player. But it was the club's future which convinced him to stay.
The young players here, and I love living in Newcastle, and I just want to play for the club and do my best and bring them young blokes along.
The star halfback also credited his decision to a talk with Michael Hagan, the incoming coach understandably buoyed by the news.
I think everyone in Newcastle, the team and the football club are delighted that he's agreed to stay for the next 4 years.
As for what he said to convince him...
Nothing that is all that inspiring. I think I just spoke to him about some of the football issues for this year and next year, and I think how important he is to the football team. And
the length of the contract could see the Johns brothers one day reunited at Newcastle and even see out Andrew's playing career.
By then, if I want to go around again, I will, but I'll probably sit down and might pull up stumps.
Colin Baldwin, NBN News. After weeks of uncertainty over the future of their high-profile teammate, there were plenty of smiles at the Knights training session this afternoon.
I think for the club, from the club's point of view, they'd be relieved, and I think the players are all very happy about it too.
But that's about where the good news ended today, with Matthew Johns delaying his comeback from injury by another week on the advice of club doctor Neil Halpin, and David Fairley not confident of playing. Once again, Warren Ryan faces a juggling act, with Rudder filling in for Johns, Simpson on standby for Fairley, and Fletcher and Donaldson the likely reserves. Fairley has given the club until Tuesday to convince him to stay. Meanwhile, a joint venture between the Knights and Club Phoenix has moved a step closer, with a members' meeting held by the club last night proving positive. The two organisations will now enter into further talks, and a decision will be made within a few weeks.
For all intents and purposes, property company True Blue is running the Newcastle Breakers. However, Soccer Australia is still to ratify the group's ownership. True Blue took over after it bought out one-time shareholder and former Breakers owner David Hall. But the code's governing body is still to give the green light on the deal, despite a meeting with company directors last weekend. And until that happens, Andy Harper won't be taking up his option for another season at Newcastle. And he's already being sounded out by other NSL clubs. Meanwhile, there's been no confirmation Wollongong striker Asala Massey has been signed with the Newcastle Breakers. In NBN Soccer League League action. Wallsend play South Cardiff tomorrow, while on Sunday the match of the round will be at Cessnock between the Hornets and the Eagles. Tomorrow, though, it'll be Rugby League Day takes centre stage at Cessnock with the Coalfields clash with Curry. On Sunday, the battle at Nelson Bay looks to be the best. In Newcastle Rugby Union, the Maitland Eastern Districts game and the Wanderers match with the Tars will feature round 11 action. The clash of the coalfields is always a big affair, and given it was 1 against 3 on the ladder, this one had even extra spice. Hooker Zane Clark giving the home crowd the perfect start. Old Curry centre Rick Ryan got the visitors on the board as the two teams began trading tries, but also trading blows, this just the start of things to come. It had little effect on Clark, he strolled over for his second. But there was nothing casual about this. Damien Engelbrett and Brett Clements coming to grips before the teams came together. Curry began landing blows that count with another try that all started with a Heyman Lowe special. The pinpoint pass and scores were level once again. If you thought that was good, what Shane Saunders showed was brilliant. On a kick return, he broke through the Bulldogs' defence before leaving them behind in a 60-metre dash to the line as the Goannas took the lead once again. In a match that became more about one-upsmanship, the Bulldogs' effort before half-time set the mark even higher, with a move that started deep inside their own half. Eventually, fullback Dean Smith did the honours. 18-16 at the break, it was a field goal that finally separated them, Cessnock winning 25-24.
Blakers Stadium has been the home of the Newcastle Blakers since the 80s, and because of that, it's been home to all of their matches. But however, their future remains unclear, as Newcastle struggles to find yet another name. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The Knights, and of course their bosses, as well as the NRL CEO, quickly had to announce something that of course was rarely good. Of course, Newcastle at a game this week. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
In a game full of controversy, it all started early with the Knights captain Tony Butterfield's tackle on Craig Smith. The match review committee cited him for a careless high tackle that could see him outed for up to 4 weeks. But in the 9th minute of the game, Butts was the victim of a high shot. Justin Riles facing between 1 and 2 weeks suspension for this. And Newcastle winger Tamana Tahu came to grips with ex-Knight Jamie Ainscoe. He's on a careless tackle charge too. While they wait to enter pleas, Adam McDougall continues to tread water in contract negotiations.
Hopefully in the next 24 hours I'll have an official meeting with the Knights and Mick Hagan and my manager, and hopefully we'll nut something out.
David Fairley will know more tonight on his future and wants to make a final decision tomorrow, with the lure of England looking too good. Fellow forward Clinton O'Brien is just hopeful his leg injury isn't too bad. After tearing his jumper at the start of yesterday's match, it was thought he'd done the same to his hamstring. However, he's optimistic of being right for Friday night. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Stretching and weightlifting up at Glendale's new Hunter Sports Athletes Centre, of course, was huge today, as there were winners as well as losers. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
Most of the world's best drivers began their careers in karting. Brendan May is hoping to follow in their footsteps. After 2 rounds of the Australian Championship, he's had 2 wins in his Intercontinental A class and holds a handy points lead.
Everything's gone wonderfully well, and hopefully we can keep it going and continue the season the way we've started it.
There's more than just the Australian series at stake. A good performance could see Brendan's Italian team enter him in the world titles. From there, who knows? But as with all sports nowadays, it'll come down to money.
V8 supercars would be good. Open wheels are good too. It's just whatever opportunities come up, just got to grab those and run with them.
Brendan's also had to juggle a fledgling motorsport career with his HSC, and no prizes for guessing what his design and technology project is.
I'm actually building my own go-kart frame, something that I've designed, and hopefully when I get it done I'll be able to bring it out here and see how we go with it.
Colin Baldwin, NBN News. It was back to normal for Yvette Rodier and Heidi Crawford today, normal being 6 days a week training at Arnold Swim Centre. Both posted a swag of personal bests and top placings at the Oceania Championships, Heidi finishing first in the 200 fly and the 4x200 relay.
Really exciting because the whole team was just cheering and they were just screaming at you, and it was really exciting.
Yvette won the 400 individual medley, setting a new games record in the process.
The time I did would have placed me fourth at the Olympic trials, so yeah, it's a good time.
While both were unsuccessful at the recent trials, they're tipped as chances to make the next Commonwealth and Olympic Games. And although they're training partners and rivals, they're also good friends.
We're going out together this Saturday night to celebrate our performances, so yeah, we get along good.
It's official. Newcastle and the Hunter will host the Australian Masters Games in late October 2001, which runs from the 5th to the 14th. And of course, it's expected to become a huge success over there. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
A casualty of the Knights' comeback win over Brisbane earlier this month, Matthew Johns finally returns to the field tomorrow night. It's a more than welcome boost for a team that's been plagued by injury.
We've got a lot of players that we've still got to get back, but it's going to help. As we're starting to get them back, we're getting stronger.
However, the news wasn't all good at the Knights' final training session, with Clinton O'Brien failing a fitness test. Matt Parsons takes his place in the starting side, with Warren Ryan yet to decide who'll come onto the bench. Meanwhile, 19-year-old Daniel Abraham faces a tall order. After only 5 first-grade games, he finds himself replacing suspended try-scorer Tamana Tahu.
Yeah, they're a big boost to fill, but it's just good to get an opportunity again in the top grade.
Abraham may start as fullback, moving Adam McDougall back to his traditional role on the wing.
The Swifts have had the wood on the Sandpipers for the last 3 seasons, and you could tell from the outset the Pipers were out to prove a point. Nat Avellino and Joanne Morgan on song for the Pipers up front, opening a 5-goal lead. In the second quarter, Australian rep Megan Anderson began finding her range. Just minutes after the main break, and the Swifts had a 3-goal lead. But when things looked to be falling their way, so did skipper Reagan Jackson. A troublesome ankle continued to nag her. It was becoming a real arm wrestle. But the real damage came in the final term. Newcastle's Danielle Harvey came on with instant effect in defence. She helped the Sandpipers reel in a 5-point deficit to sink the Swifts by 1, with Joanne Morgan hitting 54 from 62. The Stars of Tomorrow featured today in Day 1 of the State Age Netball Championships in Newcastle. 280 teams are taking part in the 3-day event. And in softball, the Castle Lakers women's team has enjoyed mixed success in the Waratah Shield. Playing 2 games today, the home side lost to Penrith 3-2, while they handed Tamworth its first loss for the season, winning 5-2.
Ray Curry ran with the ball and scored against the Northern Wolves before the Bulldogs scored more, giving their chances of the Newcastle Rugby League finals alive.
It's a far cry from the heady heights of the National Soccer League, but something fun nonetheless. Former breaker Scott Thomas back home and amongst future stars of the NSL at a coaching clinic. Together with Wollongong Wolves keeper Les Pogliacobi and Sydney Olympic Scott Bailey, the trio head a 150-strong clinic at South Cardiff. But Thomas would love to return to his home city on a permanent basis.
At some stage I'd love to come back and play here because, you know, my heart's in the town and I'm a local boy, and everyone sort of wants to play for their hometown at some stage. But for now, I think, you know, my career sort of lies elsewhere.
Next season, it'll be at the Northern Spirit after starring at recent seasons at Sydney Olympic. The 25-year-old unable to even consider the Breakers as an option given the environment of uncertainty.
Sort of disappointing in that respect because every year they sort of have off-the-field problems and it's difficult for smaller clubs to, you know, to keep their personnel, and also the management part of it's crucial.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. For months, Adam McDougall has wanted to sign up with Newcastle, but now, with an improved offer on the table, the Knights are waiting for his reply.
I met last night with George Spiolio, Adam McDougall's manager, and he had a meeting with Adam late last night.
That led to more brief talks today, but still nothing. And while the Knights wait, so does rising star Lenny Beckett. He won't do anything until McDougall makes up his mind. Selection is on coach Warren Ryan's mind, given he has a heap of players back on deck.
Sometimes you have to leave people out that have been, you know, very instrumental in your progress to the playoffs. But, you know, they are tough decisions.
With Robbie O'Davis and Darren Albert coming back through First Division, Lenny Beckett and Tamana Tahu remain on the wing against Parramatta. Dave Fairley is back, while form dictates Matt Parsons will start, but there is plenty of pressure to perform up front.
The big pressure in this team at the moment is in the front row, as you can probably realise.
But interestingly, the coach isn't paying too much attention to Parramatta's lineup, given it's likely to change dramatically before kick-off on Friday night.
I never take for granted a Parramatta team, those listed. I wouldn't be surprised who ran out for them. I wouldn't be surprised if Ray Price and Mick Cronin ran out.
And given some recent minor incidents, the club has moved quickly to remind players of their responsibilities off-field under its drug and alcohol policy. Club management was joined by representative of sponsors and the business community in a meeting with players today. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
While there was a game of basketball played up at the Newcastle Basketball Stadium, they also had a visit from one of the best legends of all. And of course, it was to inspire youngsters to play basketball. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
The Knights' final training session for the week usually sees Warren Ryan deciding who's in and who's out, but this week it seems everyone's in. While Tony Butterfield took time out last night due to a sore back, he's expected to play. Ryan's only concern now, just who'll take to the field for Parramatta.
Oh, it looks like Jason Smith will play 5'8". He wasn't in last week, and Dimmick's on the bench. I think he missed the game too. He had an elbow injury, so it looks like the two main playmakers will be in.
But the Knights will be boasting plenty of size and strength this week with the return of Dave Fairley and an informed Matt Parsons, who's retained his position in the starting side.
I think there was a quote in the paper today that's taken me a long time to hit my straps, but I've probably had a few injuries and stuff which haven't helped me, but it's just great to be back in the starting team, and I just want to hold my spot.
It's not only Parsons who's in form. The Knights' recent wins have seen them firm to second favourite to take the premiership. One punter even betting $30,000 that they'll make the grand final.
Might be a bit of smart money. He might be right, hopefully.
The Knights set off for Parramatta this afternoon. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
After weeks of
it's just a matter
drama,
of now sitting down and not looking at the financial side of it so much, but looking at where I think I'm going to be comfortable, and also where I think I'm going to play my best football. And obviously the obvious answer is I'll do that here, but in saying that too, I've got to be conscious of the fact that this is going to be the last lucrative contract that I'll sign.
Adam McDougall's extending his contract, and of course it's with Newcastle, and that's where he'll be staying for the rest of his club career. Conklin McLeod at NBN News.
Known in Newcastle as the buy of the season, David Fairley has found it hard to put a price on his year at the Knights, as he plays some of his best football. But it seems English club St Helens has found the mark, with Newcastle simply unable to come close with the money.
Told the directors and the board that my first priority is to stay here, but at the end of the day, the money that's offered by Newcastle compared to St Helens was I just couldn't compare it.
And how could they? Fairley agreed to a deal believed to be worth around $400,000, money few Australian clubs can match.
To think, you've got players like Tony Martin, who's 21. For a 21-year-old to be going and pursuing his career in England says a lot about the money that's on offer over there.
Fairley will join current teammate Peter Shields at the English club, while Matthew Johns has signed with Wigan. With injury ruling out David Fairley today and concerns over Clinton O'Brien, Newcastle can ill afford to lose Butterfield, let alone Tahu, against the Sydney Roosters.
What a grace the Queen's Council is going to, on our behalf, represent them tonight and hopefully get them off.
Butterfield faces 4-week suspension if found guilty, while Tahu could go for 2 after his tackle on Jamie Ainscough. Ironically, the Dragons winger has nothing to answer for after this shot on Tahu, which just adds to the club's frustration after those no-try rulings, and they plan to let the league know all about it.
Amana had his nose broken in the incident, so we've really come out of that game with a lot of pluses, I must say.
Pending tonight's judiciary outcome, Tahu is named on the wing with Daniel Abraham on standby, while Matthew Johns has been named to play. Matt Parsons will start if Butterfield is suspended, with Steve Simpson, the likely starter for the injured Fairley, to rejoin newly signed Sean Rudder in the back row. The 21-year-old has agreed to a 2-year deal.
I wanted to stay here and probably, I could look at myself down the track as being like a one-club man.
Also off contract, Simpson, though, isn't rushing.
Not exactly sure what's going to happen yet, but hopefully I'd like to stay in Newcastle for sure, but I'll have to wait and see, I suppose.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Okay, now it's time for the word from the Chief, Paul Harrigan.
In the last few weeks, we've seen some of the game's biggest names say they're off to England for the big money contracts. Jason Hetherington, Brad Clyde, Brett Mullins and Tony Carroll, just to name a few, while Newcastle alone has lost 3 with Dave Fairley, Matthew Johns and Peter Shields. It would be easy to say blame the fat English pay packet, but if you look at the problem a little deeper, it really starts at home, and it's all about the salary cap. In a bid to reel in big spending and stop clubs going broke, all clubs must fit player spending under $3.2 million. Effectively, the league has cut off clubs' ability to match current contract payments, let alone compete with huge money offers from overseas. As I've said in the past, if the salary cap limit was staggered over time to allow clubs to adjust to the regulations, the mass player exodus we're seeing at the moment could have been avoided. Plenty of highlights last weekend, but also too many high shots featured. Canberra's David Atkins was outed for the rest of the regular season for this one. The Saints' Jason Riles and Para's Dave Wesley both copped a week, as did Tamana Tahu, but Tony Butterfield walked on his high tackle charge. On to the tips, and firstly tonight, the Knights aren't afraid of the dark, but they've only won 6 from 17 which they've played at night, and I reckon they'll make it 7. And the other games, Eels, Tigers, Storm and the Eagles to win their games, while Canberra, Brisbane to win their games at home. Well, good luck for your tips. It's going to be pretty tough. Back to you, Rabs.
With Newcastle set to lose the likes of Butterfield, Shields and Fairley next season, it was important the club kept a hold of some of its rising talent. At 19, back rower Steve Simpson has already become a regular in the Knights' first-grade squad, while fellow teenager Josh Perry has started his top-grade starts this season. Simpson has signed on for 3 years, Perry just the 1. Meanwhile, Troy Fletcher completes the four-man bench tonight against the Roosters, with the visitors to be without State of Origin winger Matt Singh. He's torn a hamstring. Knights captain Tony Butterfield skipped a four-match suspension midweek to lead a side on the edge of the 8 against a team it hasn't beaten at home since 1996.
I think concentrating on where we are on the ladder can put the boys in a full sense of security or can distract them. I think it's important to focus more on game by game.
All the action on NBN from 8:30.
It was a much different game of the NBN Soccer League, and of course it was Waratah up against their rivals. But while there was a few pushing and shoving, but thankfully it all calmed down after that, so that the kicking of goals can be on. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
It was a day where it paid to keep your eye on the ball, but sometimes you just didn't see it coming. Like this suspect pass to Jared O'Doherty, but it didn't stop the big back rower from breaking through Lake's defence, and he found former Seagull junior Craig Camorley in support. The halfback flew away to score the first. If Lakes thought they were hard done by then, Brett Cullen's effort was denied. But you needed a second look to see why Paul Skovgaard spent some time off the park, while Lakes' defence could only watch on as Andrew Taylor finished what Camorley started. 12-0 down, Lakes needed the luck of the bounce in a big way, and they couldn't have asked for better when Clary Moran ended up with it for the visitors first. After half-time, neither side held back. But not long after, Lakes levelled with a cross-field kick that fell perfectly for Chris Hall. While the match winner came after a Paul Allardyce dart from dummy half. Lakes United winning 18-12.
The rivalry between Curry and Northern Lakes always turns everyone upside down. But of course, Northern Lakes scored. Meantime on the ladder, Waratah Mayfield are in first, while Curry and Cessnock are both tied for second and third. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Right now, here's the word from the chief himself, Paul Harrigan.
Brett Camorley's move from Melbourne to the Northern Eagles is massive news, as we've heard all week in the media. But what it will do behind the scenes for the Eagles is add credibility to what's been probably a reasonably disappointing year. It'll also attract other key players in positions that the club desperately need to fill. With that, speculation is high that Aaron Mule and Matt Guy will follow suit. The outside backs for the Eagles need a boost, and these two guys will fit the bill perfectly. When a team wins the premiership, it has little bonuses along the way which help make it a good season, and Knights winger Lenny Beckett has been that unexpected bonus. He's just turned 20 years of age and certainly wasn't in anyone's calculations to play such a major role this year. After Darren Albert's huge run of injuries, Lenny's distinctive running style, fast leg speed, dynamic step, has culminated in a genuine first-class performance last week against the Roosters. And with Lenny's contract coming up this season, the young fella's future's looking pretty bright. And on to round 23's tips, and the Knights have overcome their Friday night hoodoo last week with a win against the Roosters, but they've got to do the same again this Friday night with the added statistic that the Knights haven't beat the Eels at Parramatta Stadium for 11 years. With 3 weeks ago, I think the boys have hit form and will do the job. Penrith Dragons clash will be a tough one after Penrith's touch-up last weekend at ANZ Stadium. They'll be keen to get back on form at home. But the Dragons are in great attacking mode with Barrett, Roberts, Hookie and Blacklock leading the charge. I think they can do the job. Now the Storm, Sharks, Broncos, Raiders to win their games. And for an upset, the Cowboys will knock off the Tigers, I think, up there at Dairy Farm Stadium.
If it's the Knights that everyone has to quickly keep on smiling about, it's of course the good reasons. And of course, with Tamana Tahu extending his contract, and also it's for good. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
For the first time, a drop knee section is being contested at the state and national level. But the blue ribbon event is the Open Men's, and with riders like regular Aussie Tour pro Brock Simpson taking part, competition is tough. But Simon Sweeney clocked up some airtime in the opening heat of the men's to land in the semis tomorrow. Joining him in the final 8 as well, Michael Chappell. Australian champion Matt Whitter also looked in hot form, but this wasn't his day. He was knocked out by Port Macquarie's Robbie Gray, who showed he'll be tough to beat tomorrow. It was a case of dodging drop-ins of a different kind at Mount Sugarloaf in the opening round of the Pro Kart Series. The 125cc powered Rotex karts are the quickest in the series, and Aaron Soper needed every bit of it, starting from the back of the pack. The Talara driver worked his way through the field, but it looked to be a two-horse race between Scott Smith and Andrew Mill. But how quickly things change. Mill and Smith coming together with just 3 laps left. That opened the door for Soper, who took the lead and the race. Mill not finishing after a second collision on the same corner. It was Cessnock who had the first chance to score, but Craig Wise's effort was called back. From there, it was all Waratah in the first 40 minutes. Winger Damien Griffiths, on the end of some good lead-up, worked to post the first. Centre Frank Barrett was having a field day out wide. He sliced through some threadbare Cessnock defence to set up Steve Story, and the visitors had a 12-point lead. But the Cheetahs were far from done. Another 2 tries before half-time, and the game was as good as over at 22-0. The home side got on the board after the break, but the lead was too much to catch, especially against the competition leaders. Waratah Mayfield taking the game by 22 points.
The long-awaited Knights Leagues Club was expected to be a financial success when it opened early last year. It turned out to be anything but. With the licensed club facing a $275,000 loss this year and its football cousin no longer willing to pick up the bill, a joint board meeting last night decided to close its doors.
The club could not justify further support for the Leagues Club as it would place further strain on our limited resources.
The club's 25 employees were told this morning, all shocked by the sudden move, catering staff even having a kitchen full of food for the weekend.
We have reassured them that all their entitlements will be paid, and we are already attempting to obtain jobs for them.
The Knights also apologised to the club's 4,000 financial members, many of whom were caught out today.
Just a bit of a shock. We expected it to be coming, but didn't expect it to be so quick.
The Leagues Club will now be reviewed, but it's unlikely to be reopened. The focus also shifting to continued negotiations with Club Phoenix.
And it's just a matter of trying to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed before any final decision is made.
There's already talk of traditional post-match functions being moved to the Mayfield Club this week. Colin Baldwin, NBN News. 26-year-old Asala Marcy bagged a credible 12 goals for the Wollongong Wolves last season, and when you consider that he only played 17 games, most of them as a reserve, you know why the Breakers have signed him and why he's decided to leave the reigning premiers.
Being with Wollongong, most of the time during the season I spent on the bench rather than on the field, so that's why I'm up here. I want to spend most of my time on the field rather than sitting on the bench.
The Fijian has played 150 games in the National League in a career which also includes time with Gippsland and a stint in Youth League at Marconi under Lee Sterry in 1994.
Had a 2 weeks run with him, which was good, and that's one thing changed my mind to come up here because I know the coach.
From a future Newcastle star to future stars of the sport itself, Usually the man in charge of the Breakers, Shane Price, is training 4 Merewether Junior Soccer Club teams a week at the moment in an effort to improve the game's junior ranks.
Teaching them the right techniques and getting them enthusiastic about soccer, and hopefully we can get a few to go on with it.
Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
From early August until mid-October, the Hunter region will have a distinctly international flavour. 13 Olympic and Paralympic teams from 11 different countries will be training in Newcastle and its surrounds in the lead-up to Sydney 2000, more than double the number of teams organisers were hoping for. It follows a strong campaign to officials by the Hunter Olympic Business Task Force.
We're 2 hours north of Sydney, and we have wonderful facilities and great accommodation as well. So I think the word's got out and people have obviously seen what we have here, and we've attracted them through that.
Amongst them will be athletes from Ireland, the Netherlands and China. They'll be training at facilities across the area, including the Glendale Athletics and Gymnastics Centre and the Forum. And it's not over yet. Officials from Russia and Spain have also expressed a keen interest in the region.
I would imagine that we would have at least maybe another 3 or 4 teams coming here before the Games.
In dollar terms, the influx of 530 international athletes and their entourage is expected to bring more than $7 million to the region. Already the Games have created 690 new jobs. Catherine Turner, NBN News.
In one of the most damaging bouts of the year, of course, one of Newcastle's boxers was hoping to get a win. And got it within just in. It was right up against his opponent. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
When Troy Endicott's mother took him to John Hunter Hospital's emergency room a fortnight ago Saturday, she and her son were sent home. Doctors had diagnosed his condition as gastroenteritis. But Cheryl Endicott believed it may have been something more after the family all fell sick after eating pizza. A few days later, Troy's condition deteriorated.
He was walking around the house like he just didn't know where he was going, just bumping into things and laying down the floor and going to sleep just like you think someone was in a coma.
It wasn't hard to see that the child was extremely sick and ill. At that stage she was lapsing in and out of consciousness, and that must say something to a doctor.
But unfortunately it didn't. By the next weekend, Troy slipped into a coma, dying early this week after being rushed to a Sydney hospital. His parents now believe an earlier diagnosis may have saved their child and are calling for a coronial inquest into his death. Hunter Health refused to publicly comment on the matter today, but they did release this statement claiming the decision to first send Troy home was made on clinical grounds, not on the availability of beds. The hospital also insists it took 7 days for him to develop the symptoms of the fatal condition. Apparently only the second case in the Hunter this year. Autopsy results will be officially released next week, but are expected to confirm the condition as hemolytic uremic syndrome, a severe case of food poisoning.
We do not want this to happen to any other people, because, he's a 2-year-old baby that we love dearly, and I just don't wish anybody to go through the pain.
Helen Kapelos, NBN News. The Hunter Street West premises of Proclaim Place have sheltered the area's homeless for the last 2 years. But in that time, the refuge has provided a less than satisfactory neighbour to nearby businesses in the community, dealing with the associated problems such as alcoholism. They now hope a $750,000 pledge by the state government to build a new crisis centre behind the old SES headquarters at Tyers Hill will provide a more efficient model.
The current situation with Proclaim Place won't be replicated in any situation that we move it to. The idea that Docks and community housing has is we change the model so that we don't replicate this anywhere else in Newcastle.
Newcastle Council agree the Elizabeth Street site is a good location, but say ultimately it's up to the community.
If the community is accepting of the location, the council is very keen to support it.
Meantime, the City Centre Committee says it's so confident with the plan it will put up its own funds if necessary.
The business community will do whatever it can to put some resources into it, but it's a very good sign of where Newcastle's heading if we can get all the stakeholders together to come up with a solution that we think everyone will find useful and will work for the people involved.
Experiencing the highs and lows as a player, Michael Hagan's rugby league rollercoaster ride has taken many turns in recent years. After coaching Canberra to within a game of the grand final this season, his contract with Norths for the coming season fell through as the Bears went insolvent. A few weeks later, and Hagan is Newcastle's First Division mentor.
I'd like to welcome you officially, Michael, and I think we'll work pretty well together.
A popular Knights player and captain for many years, Hagan suffered the brunt of anti-Super League sentiment when he joined the Mariners.
Well, that was a very difficult time for me and for a lot of people back then, and I don't think it's something I'd like to personally go through again. That was a difficult period, and it's time to move on and get on with other things.
Those things will be to develop younger players towards higher honours in his 2-year deal with the club.
I think that's primarily the role, is to develop young players that come through the system, and I know the 19s have done very well this year. We want to see as many of those people progress to first grade and try and give as much support to Warren as I possibly can.
Hagan beat a field of 9 applicants that included 2 Knight lower grade coaches, Craig Miller and Steve Burriston.
The Auckland side looked to be facing a long flight home early on, John Bonavoglia taking off and finding the back of the net. The Breakers pressed the attack, successive shots keeping the Kings busy. Auckland only found the woodwork in reply, while Greg Owens found himself down and out. The Breakers then seemed to lose direction, only denying the Kings with some frantic defence. The Auckland attack continued into the second half. Ex-breaker Robbie Middleby tried for the equaliser, but in the end it was scored by his coach Winton Rufer with less than 10 minutes remaining. Both sides had chances to take the win, but in the end they shared the points. One of the oldest surf contests in the country, the Matara Classic wasn't blessed by good weather for its 37th running. Chasing $4,000 prize money and points on the Australian Championship circuit, competitors did their best in the dicey conditions. But after 12 heats, organisers decided enough was enough. The event called off until tomorrow. The show did roll on, though, in the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic. 75 of the world's top riders contested the first stage in Sydney, Dutchman Jan Koets taking the win. The Classic heads to the Hunter tomorrow. The Harlem Globetrotters, at least, were high and dry today. The now legendary troupe of basketballers put on their first of 2 shows at Newcastle Entertainment Centre this afternoon, playing up to the crowd and the camera. The Globetrotters' handling skills defy both description and the laws of physics, and they'll do it all again later tonight. Day 4 saw the 74 riders facing the longest stage of the Cycle Classic. Some of the international riders weren't deterred by the 154-kilometre distance, but it was 2 Australians who eventually took an early lead. Tom Brooke and Cameron Jennings left the field in their tyre tracks, including tour leader Jeremy Hunt. The pair set the pace for more than 100 kilometres before being chased down. Eventually, Newcastle Criterium winner Max van Heeswijk broke away with 3 kilometres to go to take the leg and the record for the most number of stage wins in tour history.
Today I felt real good. I said to my teammates, today I have to win.
Britain's Jeremy Hunt still holds a 13-second lead going into tomorrow's 2 Central Coast stages. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
The water was sparkling at Newcastle Beach today, and according to Beach Watch, it's rarely otherwise. Hunter Water carries out regular testing for the monitoring body and says new secondary sewage treatment plants brought online in the last decade have made all the difference.
We've spent a lot of money, upwards of $150 million, in improving our coastal facilities, and I guess the results, I think, are there for everyone to see. The beaches are very clean.
Beach Watch tests the coastal water quality between Port Stephens and Wollongong, and to the Hunters' credit, it's the only region that meets the fecal coliform guidelines 100% of the time. However, there have been periods of elevated bacteria over the past year, usually coinciding with heavy rainfall.
The indicator isn't an indicator only of human pollution, it's an indicator of pollution from seabirds and dogs and cats. And if you get heavy rain, basically you'll clean off anything that's been dropped into a catchment, and it ends up in the receiving water.
Some say regular water users still need to be selective about the times they swim.
The ocean outfall, the deep water outfall at Burwood, while it's great when the currents are going the right way, when they're not, like in a southerly or after a heavy rain incident, I wouldn't go swimming.
But ask ocean lifeguards like Jeff Sargent and you'll get the full story.
I'll give it a 10 out of 10 now. That's excellent, yeah.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
With Greg Owens out and Lee Sterry less than impressed with the Breakers' performance against Auckland, it's no surprise there's been some changes to the side for Saturday's clash with Gippsland.
We're certainly looking for a stronger midfield line, that's for sure, in work rate, commitment, and certainly still we want to have some ball-playing flair in there.
Chris Tancheski returns to the squad after 4 weeks in Youth League, nursing a hamstring injury, while Glenn Spride and Peter Junknowitz have been named in the starting 11, with Vasco Trapeski relegated to the bench. Changes aside, the team faces a tough task, with Sterry rating the Gippsland game as a hard away encounter.
If it's not the worst, it's the second worst. So it's not a good road trip, but at the end of the day, last year we got in there and got out of there and got 3 points.
Day 5 of the cycling trek got underway, and of course, if there was only one winner, and of course there just had to be one. And of course it occurred up in the Hunter as well, and also it was Newcastle's turn that had to be the host. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
Only 6 months ago, Lee Sterry was waiting to be re-signed altogether. How times have changed. Team management today announcing the coach will stay until 2002.
We've only scratched the surface with what we want to do, and it's great pride that I've been installed with a further 2 years on top of the year that I've got to run now.
Sterry says the deal allows him to look to long-term plans, and both he and team boss David Hall want to head to Britain in the next few weeks to foster relations with clubs like Watford and Manchester United. The aim is to set up a formal relationship where promising breakers could trial overseas and vice versa.
They're probably best 23, 22, 24, 25-year-olds are not even looking at a first-team shirt because they're allowed to have as many Europeans as they like, or overseas players. So I think there'd be at least a couple of players on the Manchester United books that would do us a job this year.
One breaker who's already trialled with an English side, Chris Tancheski. He returns to the senior squad this weekend after trying to recover from a hamstring injury in the Youth League, the same injury that cost him a possible berth with Aston Villa in the off-season.
I've thought about it time and time again, but you got to lift your head up and get on with the job. And now, I'm here to do a job for Lee and the side.
It was, of course, a weekend of Black Diamond AFL, and of course, Cardiff knew exactly what to do. Kick for goals, as well as securing a win. And of course, their other teams also did it as well. And of course, Cardiff managed to secure the win right throughout the entire game, with the Cardiff Hawks keeping their campaign for the finals alive. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Boxing can be a dangerous but toughen up sport, but also it can be really brutal, just like these two boxers. And of course, this match occurred at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre overnight. And of course, one Newcastle boxer definitely had to have a title right onto his system. Conklin McLeod at NBN News.
It's the closest bodyboard championship battle in the Australasian Tour's history, with no less than 7 competitors in the hunt from the outset of today's heats. The surf wasn't sensational, but it didn't matter. The Central Coast Luke Cousins won, making enough of an impression to earn a berth in tomorrow's finals. For the top 6 finishers on the tour, there's an added bonus. All go on to compete at the Moray Pro in Hawaii.
We've got the most amount of seeds in the world, 6 going into the pipeline contest, the biggest contest in bodyboarding in the world, and they're fighting it out. They really want to get there.
Also on the water, competitors in the Lake Surf Classic. A dozen paddlers contested today's 25-kilometre course, winding their way between Catherine Hill Bay, Caves Beach and Moon Island. A big field is expected for a shorter race tomorrow.
Yeah, certainly will be. Stavis will have the rest of the local sports news from July 2000 coming up after the break.
Into big business now, are we?
No, I'm quite happy with the small business I own, Louise.
Who are you banking with now, Bob?
Newcastle Permanent.
No, I know. I mean your company banking.
Yeah, we're with the firm.
Didn't know they did business banking.
Well, I have done for quite some time now, Dad.
Oh, good move.
That's mine. Thank you.
Your business is in good hands with Newcastle Permanent.
They're our building society.
Wake up in the morning, gotta get...
Because the Herald is the best way to start your day.